My name is Camille Hartley. I'm 35 years old, live in East Atlanta, and run a small design consultancy out of a corner office above a bookstore. I'm married to Isaiah, a man most people wouldn't look at twice, at least not the way my family looks at people. To them, Isaiah was always the proof that I had failed, not because of who he is, but because of what he isn't. Right now, I'm parked in a gravel lot at the edge of the Dahlvine estate, watching white tents ripple in the breeze over rolling vineyard hills. It's my younger sister's bridal brunch, Charlotte, the golden child. The event started 30 minutes ago. The email invite wasn't sent to me. I saw it by accident, forwarded by a publicist I used to mentor. The subject line said, "Family only." I sit still for a moment in the driver's seat, the air thick with late spring heat. Then I reach for my ivory blazer folded on the passenger seat. Smooth cotton clean lines. I slip it on slowly like armor. I don't dress to be noticed. I dress to remind myself that I still belong somewhere, even if that place is only inside my own skin. The walk from the car to the estate's lawn is quiet except for the crunch of gravel beneath my heels and the distant clinking of champagne glasses. There are welcome signs staked along the path in gold script, celebrating Charlotte and Landon. I count them as I pass 5-1 for every year since I last heard my mother say my name without a pause before it. Charlotte is everything they hoped for, polished, presentable, engaged to the founder of a rising tech platform. Her world is curated, clean edges, whispered connections. Mine, by contrast, was always a bit off the script. A black husband, a rented townhome for years, clients that paid late success. They didn't understand, so they dismissed it. Isaiah and I built a life without applause, which to my family meant it wasn't real. As I reach the edge of the terrace, the view opens. Tents stretch across the hill like ivory sails. Every table is dressed in soft pink linen with high centerpieces of blush peonies and white lilacs. I remember my mother once saying, "Lilacs are too pedestrian for formal events." I guess Charlotte made them acceptable. I don't cross into the tent right away. I stand just at the edge, the hem of my blazer brushing the breeze. From here, I can see her Charlotte. She's standing with a glass of champagne mid-toast, wearing an off-white dress that hugs her like it was stitched onto her skin. Her voice floats up and out. "Family isn't just about shared blood," she says. "It's about who lifts you, who reflects your best self." A wave of laughter follows, gentle and approving. I don't smile. I just note the precision of it all. Her tone, her posture, her timing. She was always good at appearances. Beside her, I spot my mother. She's seated with two other women at a corner table wearing a cream silk blouse and a pearl necklace I once gave her for her birthday. She told me at the time that pearls were too traditional, but today they match the aesthetic. She doesn't see me yet. I shift my weight 1 foot forward now. The soft fabric of my blazer whispers at my wrist. I remember when I bought it a year ago at the end of a long week when I closed 3 contracts back to back and Isaiah took me out for crab cakes at a tiny cafe near Midtown. I spotted the blazer in the window of a boutique I'd never noticed before. It wasn't flashy, just clean and strong. I didn't need it, but I wanted it. That was new for me, wanting something without apology. A server walks by carrying a tray of champagne. He glances at me, pauses for a second, like he's trying to place me, then keeps walking. I don't stop him. I didn't come for the drinks. "Camille," a voice says, sudden and clipped. I turn slightly. It's my mother. Her smile is thin, her eyes sharper than I remember. "This isn't the best moment." "I figured," I say. Her lips twitch, not quite a frown, not quite a smile. "I'm sure you understand this is Charlotte's day. It's not appropriate." I nod once I'm not here to make a scene. She studies me. I wonder if she's trying to find something in my face. Regret, discomfort, need I give her none of those. "You look professional," she says finally. "Thank you." She turns without another word and walks back toward her table. I let her go. I walk the perimeter of the tent, staying on the edge. I don't need to be in the center. Not anymore. I pause beneath a wisteria arch where purple shadows fall over the gravel. The party noise fades just slightly here. I close my eyes for a moment. I used to think power meant being at the table, but sometimes it means knowing exactly when not to sit down. A breeze moves through the vines. The air smells like wet stone and white flowers. I picture Isaiah back home barefoot in the kitchen, probably stirring something with jazz playing low in the background. He offered to come today. I told him no. This wasn't about us. It was about what they chose not to see. They never asked who he was, what we built. They saw a name tag once and decided it was the whole story. They asked what he earned, not what he carried, not what he stayed for, not what he fixed in me when the rest of the world said broken. My phone buzzes lightly in my blazer pocket. I don't check it. Not yet. Back inside the tent, Charlotte raises another toast. To legacy, she says, lifting her glass, and to the future we choose. There are cheers, smiles, camera flashes. I let the sound settle around me. It doesn't sting the way it used to. I'm not angry, not even sad, just done. Sometimes you show up not to be seen, but to see them, and now I have. I turn slowly, walk back down the stone path toward the parking lot. My heels echo softly behind me. The wind tugs at the edge of my blazer, and in the distance, the laughter rolls on like I was never there at all. Which is exactly how they wanted it, and exactly how I needed it to be. The first thing I noticed was the handkerchief. White linen soft to the touch with our initials C, and I embroidered in navy thread at one corner. It lay crumpled beside the trash bin behind the Glenberry Country Club, just a few steps from the valet stand. Maybe it slipped from my purse, maybe someone set it there. But the placement felt intentional, like punctuation. A small, quiet insult that didn't need a voice to echo. Isaiah had already reached the car. He stood beside the passenger door, shoulders squared, his hands tucked in his coat pockets. Not angry, not even sad, just tired in that way. Only quiet men get when they've borne enough small wounds to fill a book and still show up to turn the page. "You okay?" he asked when I stepped in. I nodded, but it wasn't the truth. I'm not sure what that word means anymore. The ride home was silent except for the sound of tires over asphalt and the low hum of traffic drifting past our windows. I held the handkerchief in my lap, folding it carefully as if it still mattered, as if dignity were a fabric you could smooth back into shape. The brunch had gone about as I expected. The Glenberry Country Club is all white stone and inherited attitude, a place where linen napkins are folded like swans, and everyone pretends not to notice whose name is missing from the donor plaques I knew walking in what we were stepping into. Charlotte was being honored by the Board of Women Entrepreneurs for launching her new brand, an artisanal line of home gadgets and lifestyle accessories. All pastel branding and reclaimed wood charm. My mother had practically floated in beside her beaming. They gave Charlotte a crystal award, praised her modern vision, and toasted her future with an orange-infused mimosa. When it was my turn to be introduced, someone hesitated, then mispronounced my last name, then moved on. No one mentioned my design firm. No one asked what I'd been building the last 8 years, what Isaiah and I had built together without handouts or headlines. Then, during dessert, my father leaned across the table, polished silver gleaming in front of him, and said too loudly, "Camille, you've always gone your own way, but you have to admit, you married down." The fork in my hand stilled. "I mean," he added, chuckling, "he's a janitor, right? Nice guy, but you could have done better." The table went still, except for Charlotte, who gave a small performative wince and then looked away as if embarrassed for me not by them. Isaiah said nothing. Just kept his eyes on his plate, his left hand resting near mine under the table, fingers still and warm. That moment replayed the entire ride home, and long after. They never asked what Isaiah actually did, never cared enough to find out. What they didn't know, what they never bothered to see, was that Isaiah owns one of the largest janitorial service contracts in the State 5 regional teams, more than 60 employees. He also holds a silent stake in a real estate investment group that just closed on a commercial development deal north of the city, a $12 million portfolio. But none of that mattered, because they had decided years ago what his worth was. And for a while I let them believe the name tag Isaiah wore at a fundraising gala years ago told the whole story. He was helping clean up after a sponsor pulled out and we stepped in last minute. My mother saw him sweeping, said nothing, and never asked why the manager addressed him as sir they assumed, and I said nothing. Because I needed to know if they'd love me without the illusion. They didn't. I was 27 when I first introduced Isaiah to my parents. Charlotte had just come back from Paris with photos of her trip plastered across social media and a new boyfriend whose family name was stitched into the back of every country club polo shirt. At dinner, my father asked Isaiah where he went to school. Isaiah replied, honestly, community college trade certification, then work. My mother's smile didn't falter, but her eyes cooled. Charlotte interrupted, launching into a story about her latest design internship. The focus shifted as it always did. Later that night, Mom called me. She never said the word, but I heard it anyway. You're going to make life harder for yourself, Camille. You need to think about optics, about the future. It wasn't just about race, it was about image appearances perfection. Charlotte fit the mold I never did. The difference showed up in the smallest ways. When Charlotte got engaged, my parents sent out embossed announcements and hosted a pre-party with 3 local news anchors on the guest list. When Isaiah and I got married, we invited them to a small courthouse ceremony in Savannah. They declined. No explanation. Charlotte got a Tesla from her fiancé. I got a voicemail that said, "You could have at least waited for someone more stable." They never knew about the nights Isaiah stayed up with me during client losses, printing branding mock-ups on our apartment floor at 2 a.m., or how he paid our rent 2 months in a row when one of my contracts fell through, or the way he held me after I lost a grant that could have changed everything. They never saw him build with me. They just saw his skin, his silence, and his shoes. At some point, I stopped offering them updates, stopped trying to explain. But today, after that brunch, it hit me differently. It wasn't that they misunderstood Isaiah. It was that they saw him clearly and chose not to see what mattered. Because if they acknowledged his worth, they'd have to confront their own limitations, their own ugliness, the gap between how they present and who they are. As I sit in our living room now, the afternoon light drifting across the wood floors, Isaiah refinished by hand, I unfold the handkerchief again. The embroidery at the corner is a little frayed C, and I, a gift from the day we signed our first joint business account. It had fallen near the trash outside the club. I pick it up gently, smooth the edge with my thumb. They thought I married down. What they don't realize is that Isaiah never needed to rise to meet them. They were never the standard. The wedding photo sits on the dresser across from my bed. It's always been there unframed, just tucked into the corner of the mirror like it's waiting for something else to hold it. It's a matte print, soft around the edges. Isaiah in his navy suit. Me in a plain ivory dress standing outside the courthouse in Savannah. There's no one else in the picture, just the 2 of us, the wind catching my veil, his hands firm around my waist. It wasn't meant to be that way. I had invited them. My parents, my sister. Even printed the invitations myself on recycled cardstock. I sent them weeks in advance. I never got a response. Not a no, not a maybe. Just silence that rang louder than any spoken rejection. That day, I remember waiting on the courthouse steps 10 minutes past the start time, hoping for a miracle. Isaiah didn't say anything. He just stood beside me, one hand resting lightly on my back, steady. When I finally accepted they weren't coming, he didn't tell me it would be okay. He didn't try to erase the hurt. He just said, "Let's begin." And we did. It wasn't the first time I'd been erased, not even close. I was 15 the first time I realized I was the backup daughter. That spring, I won first place at the Georgia State Science Symposium, a project on solar nanofiltration, something I'd worked on for months, late nights, scribbling notes under my covers with a flashlight. My teacher called my parents personally. The school printed a newsletter. The local paper wrote a tiny blurb. We sat in the auditorium, the air thick with the smell of old carpet and metal chairs. When they called my name, I walked across the stage to polite applause and looked out into the crowd. My parents were clapping, but their eyes weren't on me. Charlotte had just made captain of her cheer squad that week, and Mom had brought balloons, bright oversized ones that bumped against other people's heads. Everyone noticed them. No one remembered the certificate I was handed. That night at dinner, Dad said not all of us are meant for microscopes, then turned to Charlotte and asked how tryouts went. No one asked what the judges said about my project. No one asked what it meant to win. In college, I made the dean's list 6 semesters in a row. I emailed the news to my parents. I got a reply once from my mother. "That's nice, sweetheart. Don't forget to congratulate Charlotte." Her article was just published in the university fashion blog. Charlotte switched majors 3 times, dropped out for a semester, took a gap year to find her brand. My parents paid for every pivot without hesitation. When I applied for a scholarship and asked for tax documents to finalize it, my father said, "Can't you just take out a loan like everyone else?" When I got my first job, a small branding agency in Raleigh, I drove home that weekend to celebrate. I walked in carrying a pie I'd baked and an offer letter in my bag. Charlotte was there with a new boyfriend and a set of silk samples spread across the table. Mom barely looked up. "You should have called," she said. "We're in the middle of planning Charlotte's fall line." So I put the pie in the fridge, left the letter unopened, stayed the night in my childhood room where the walls still held the glow-in-the-dark stars I'd stuck on the ceiling when I was 9. I stopped announcing things after that. Stopped expecting applause for things they didn't value. But some things still cut even when you think you've dulled the blade. Like birthdays? One year, I sent Charlotte a necklace engraved with a phrase she loved. I'd spent weeks finding the right artisan. She didn't reply. Months later, she posted a photo wearing it with the caption, "Thanks to my brand team for this gift." No mention of me, no correction. Another year, she forgot my birthday entirely. I still sent her tulips. It's strange how deep silence can go, how heavy it becomes over time. You start questioning whether it's something you did or something you are. You start making yourself smaller just to fit the space they've made for you. But the space never grows. At some point, I stopped sending gifts, stopped picking up calls that only came when something needed fixing. A furnace bill, a design favor, a rushed contact for someone's wedding vendor. I answered less, smiled less. Still loved, but from farther away. Isaiah noticed it first. How quiet I got after family calls, how I would shrink after holidays. He didn't press, just placed a cup of tea near me every time and sat down quietly nearby. "Do you want them to change?" he asked once, not judgmentally, just curious. "I want them to see me," I said. He nodded as if that was reason enough. And still I hoped. Even when logic told me otherwise, part of me held space for a call, a letter, a moment of recognition, some acknowledgement that I existed outside of Charlotte's shadow, that I had built something worth pride, not just tolerated, but celebrated. It never came. I walk to the dresser now and lift the photo from the mirror. The corner curls slightly where the paper has started to wear. I press it flat with my thumb. There's no frame because I never gave it that much permanence. Part of me always waited to put it in a real one. Waited for their approval, their presence, some sign that our love, my life was worthy enough to display. Now I know it always was. I just needed to stop waiting for them to say so. That's the part no one tells you, that you can carry someone's absence longer than their presence ever lasted, that the space they didn't fill can become louder than any praise. But I'm learning. Praise given to mask neglect is not a gift. It's a cover, and it doesn't make the silence any softer. Not anymore. The envelope was heavy even before I opened it. Cream-colored thick stock, my name embossed in gold across the front. Just Camille, no last name, no. And guessed. The address label was printed, not handwritten. That was the first clue. The second was the return label. Charlotte and Landon Dalvine Estate. No note, no message. Just a gesture dressed in marble graphics and rose gold foil. I stood in the entryway holding it for a long time. Sunlight poured through the windows and pooled on the floor at my feet. The envelope felt like it had weight, but not meaning, like it had traveled a long way, only to say nothing. When I opened it, the card inside practically gleamed. A photo of Charlotte and Landon posed mid-laugh stood in front of a white gazebo that looked like it had been staged just for the camera. "Celebrate the union," it read, "private ceremony, exclusive brunch, family only." No RSVP card, no call, no hint of welcome, just a declaration. I set it down on the console table and went to the kitchen to make tea. Isaiah was at the gym. The house was quiet, filled only with the sound of the kettle clicking on and the soft hum of our refrigerator. I stood by the stove, unmoving arms folded. The scent of lavender and lemon from the diffuser curled through the air, trying to soothe something that wasn't willing to be soothed. At first, I did what I always do. I opened my laptop and pulled up the website of the gallery. Charlotte loved Florin and Finch. I browsed until I found a painting she'd once pointed out in a magazine. $150. A landscape in pale blue and gold tones. It would match the aesthetic. It would be on brand. I added it to my cart. Then I sat back, stared at the screen. The familiar tug, the reflex to fix, to smooth, to participate, rose in me like a tide, but underneath it, something else stirred. Not anger, not quite, just fatigue. The kind that comes from being asked again and again to fund your own invisibility. Last year, Charlotte forgot my birthday. Not belated, just completely forgotten. I still sent her flowers, a handwritten note. It took me 20 minutes to write it, crafting every word like a peace offering. She never replied. The year before that, Mom's roof caved in after a storm. The insurance wouldn't cover it. Isaiah and I paid the contractors up front. No questions asked. 2 months later, my mother introduced us at a family gathering by saying, "This is Camille. She's always helping out when someone's in a pinch. So generous. Not successful, not brilliant, not even my daughter. Just useful." It happened again and again. When Grandpa's medical bills piled up, I handled the balance. When Charlotte needed emergency graphic design for her website before a launch, I pulled an all-nighter to finish it even after being told I wasn't creative enough for that line of work. They asked for help like they were ordering room service. No gratitude, no recognition, just expectation dressed as family tradition. I returned to the hallway, looked down at the invitation still sitting there like a taunt, and then turned away. Not this time. Instead of completing the gift purchase, I opened my notes app, tapped the screen, typed 7 words. They gave you their truth, give them yours. I read it twice, then again. Then I hit save. Later that night, Isaiah noticed the envelope on the table. He picked it up, raised an eyebrow. "You going?" I shook my head, wasn't invited, technically. He set it back down gently. "You okay?" "I will be." We didn't talk about it after that. But something in me shifted. The next morning, I pulled a small velvet box from the back of my closet. It had been intended as a gift months ago, a sculpted piece of art I commissioned from a metalworker in Santa Fe. 2 trees intertwined their roots tangled beneath them, maple and ash strength and adaptation. I had planned to send it to my parents as a peace offering. I had even written a small card to go with it. But I never mailed it. And now, as I turned the box over in my hands, I understood why I had been asking for a kind of love they never offered, a kind they didn't seem to know how to give. Not without conditions, not without control. I placed the box back on the shelf, pulled out a sticky note instead, wrote a message just for me. No gift this time. Not because you're angry, but because they already gave you their answer. That note went into my planner folded between the pages of next week's schedule. Later that afternoon, Charlotte texted me. No greeting, no question, just a single line. "Mom says that painting from Florin would be perfect. Can you have it sent to the venue?" "No, please. No, how are you?" No acknowledgement that I might not be attending. I didn't reply, but I did sit with it. Sat in the quiet of my office, stared out the window as cars passed slowly beneath the trees. This was what they did. Measured love by output. Called it support, called it tradition. But it was conditional. Measured. And it always cost me more than it gave. This time I wouldn't pay it. I closed my eyes, breathed deep, and let the silence stretch without guilt. That night, as Isaiah read in bed beside me, I pulled out a pen and my journal. Not for anyone else. Not a blog. Not a post. Just a private reckoning. I wrote one sentence. This is the moment I stop proving my worth to people who need me quiet to love me. And I underlined it. Twice. Then I closed the book, turned off the lamp, and slept better than I had in months. The email subject line was cheery, full of exclamation marks and pink fonts, Bridal registry gift launch. Limited run preview. It came from a PR firm I recognized one Charlotte had worked with when launching her lifestyle brand the year before. I almost deleted it without opening, but habit or something else made me click. I scrolled past rose-colored banners and blurbs about curated tablescapes and custom candle sets. Then I saw it item 4 in the carousel. A flower sifter, sleek minimalist dual compartment, a thin metallic frame with soft touch edges and eco-coated inserts. Patent pending, the caption read. But I had seen it before. 3 years ago, Isaiah had built a prototype just like it in our apartment kitchen. He soldered the metal frame by hand, using parts from an old lamp and a bicycle brake. I still remember the way he frowned at the measurements, muttering under his breath, sanding down a corner with the edge of a butter knife. We ate cereal that night because he'd spent our grocery budget on the project. He called it a flower sifter, too. Laughed when he said it wasn't pretty enough to win awards. But I had saved it anyway. Not just the prototype, which still sat in a shoebox in the hall closet, but the blueprints, the napkin sketches, the notes he'd scribbled on printer paper and left near the sink. And I'd done what Isaiah never thought to do. I filed them, archived them, protected them. 3 years ago, I'd created an LLC for a freelance consulting project, Marston Design Holdings. It had sat dormant since, but I used it to submit a provisional patent request for his design. Quietly, carefully, just in case. Now here it was, marketed under my sister's name, branded as her exclusive innovation. There was no mention of Isaiah. No sign of collaboration, just a caption that read, "Designed by the Winthrop Studio team." I closed the email, walked to the closet, pulled down the shoebox. Inside, wrapped in crinkled brown tissue, sat the original prototype. A little rough, a little dented, but his ours. I ran a finger along the frame. And then I opened my laptop. It didn't take long. I pulled up the original design files from my cloud backup. All dated, time-stamped, linked to Isaiah's sketches. I created a new folder, then exported the legal forms from my archive templates for intellectual property disputes, pre-formatted cease and desist letters and distribution withdrawal agreements. It wasn't anger driving me, not anymore. It was precision. An hour later, I had everything assembled. I filled in the recipient, the Winthrop Collective, Charlotte's brand umbrella, added the contact for their legal rep, someone I'd encountered once at a gallery exhibit years ago. Then I signed it Clara V. Lorne, legal representative, Marston Design Holdings, LLC. It wasn't deception, it was protection. Clara had been my legal alias since my first corporate design case. It helped keep boundaries clear, it kept my name off gossip trails, and today it kept the drama out of my inbox. I attached a sticky note to the envelope before sealing it. "You love the idea. You just didn't know it was ours." I didn't send a gift to the bridal brunch. I sent this. The next morning, I made one more call. The Florin Gallery had been scheduled to showcase its art at Charlotte's event. It was one of the reasons the brunch had been dubbed a luxury media moment. I knew the gallery's director, Elin Felder, personally. Years ago, he'd approached me about funding a sustainability initiative I'd quietly helped push it through. "Elon," I said as he picked up, "I'm withdrawing my name from Friday's feature collection." He paused. "Camille, are you sure this is very last minute?" "I'm sure." "I didn't offer more." He hesitated, then understood. "I'll inform the team." That was it. No press release, no grand confrontation. But the ripple came anyway. By Thursday morning, blogs began to whisper. The signature art partnership pulled out. The luxury edge of the event dulled. They replaced the gallery collection with mass-market floral canvases from a staging company. The photos looked flat, like someone tried too hard to replicate warmth. One post read, "From curated to cringeworthy, how the brunch lost its sparkle overnight." Another noted that a key design element was mysteriously withdrawn. They didn't name names. I didn't offer one. Isaiah noticed the shift that evening as he scrolled his tablet on the couch. "This wasn't you, was it?" he asked, a smile tugging at his lips. I didn't answer. I just folded the prototype tissue back into the box and set it on the shelf. The moment wasn't about revenge. It was about preservation. It was about seeing your love, Your life turned into something consumable and choosing not to let it happen without a trace of truth. Charlotte hadn't asked. Not about the prototype, not about the sketches. Not even about the person behind them. She'd only seen something that fit the aesthetic. But I knew better. And now so did the people watching. I didn't need credit. I didn't need applause. I just needed them to know it wasn't theirs. And that it never had been. The executive floor of Verne Holdings was quieter than I expected. No one spoke above a murmur. The soft whoosh of glass doors sliding open and the quiet thud of shoes over carpet were the only sounds filling the corridor. Gregory Dahl walked 2 steps ahead of me, calm and unhurried, his leather portfolio tucked beneath one arm, like it weighed nothing at all. We stopped outside a large oak double door. The glass walls framed a panoramic view of San Francisco's skyline, gray mist clinging to the edges of high-rises. Below, traffic pulsed like a slow breath. "This is your seat," Gregory said quietly, gesturing to the chair beside his at the center of the long boardroom table. I nodded, adjusted the cuff of my black blazer, and walked in. The room buzzed the moment I stepped through the door. Low murmurs, head turns, a sharp inhale from someone near the far end. Charlotte was already seated on the other side of the table wearing cream silk, her hair coiled into polished waves. Her fiancé, Landon, sat beside her, stiff-backed, his expression unreadable. Across the room, our mother looked like she'd aged 10 years overnight. She blinked at me, stunned. I took my seat without a word. A legal assistant closed the door behind me with a soft click. Gregory stood pressing his palms lightly to the glossy wood table. "Before we begin the vote, I'd like to formally introduce the voting co-chair for today's session, Ms. Camille Hartley." Charlotte's mouth opened slightly, then shut. Her champagne-colored nail polish flashed as she tightened her grip around her clutch. "What is she doing here?" She asked the question directed at no one, her voice high and cracking. Gregory didn't flinch. Per Clause 14B, any proposed equity transfer impacting the Nevada portfolio must be approved by all co-trustees. Camille is listed on record. "That trust was dormant," our mother interjected, eyes wide. "You said it hadn't been touched in years." "It hadn't," I said calmly, "until last week." From my bag, I removed a thin manila folder and slid it forward to the center of the table. Clause 14B, page 4. Signature and reactivation notice filed 3 days ago. Landon leaned forward, scanning the document. "Wait, this means—" "It means," Gregory said, "that without Camille's affirmative vote, the temporary engagement clause you added for Charlotte's access to the Nevada and Florida holdings is invalid. The board is unable to proceed." A heavy silence dropped into the room like a stone in water. Charlotte stood abruptly. "This is ridiculous. She's bitter. This is a personal vendetta because she never had what I have." She pointed across the table at me. "You've always hated that I was chosen, that I built something real." I tilted my head slightly, letting her words fall and echo before responding. "You stole Isaiah's design. You used it as your own. You ignored me until you needed something, and now you want to pretend this is about jealousy." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Our mother stood then too, clutching her handbag like it might steady her. "Camille, this is not the place." "This is exactly the place," Gregory cut in voice calm but firm. The board members looked between us, some with discomfort, others with open interest. I turned, slightly facing them. 3 years ago, I was made co-trustee of a dormant equity trust connected to the Nevada real estate developments. It was placed under a holding name for flexibility. At the time, no one thought much of it, but that trust owns 13% of the portfolio now linked to Verne Holdings. The moment Charlotte and Landon tied that to their engagement proposal, it required my signature. Landon rubbed his forehead. "This wasn't supposed to be—" "About control," I offered. "It's always about control." Charlotte's voice broke. "You ruined everything." I looked her in the eyes. "No. You did that the day you decided you didn't need me until it was profitable." She started to say something else, but Gregory raised a hand gently. "The board accepts Ms. Hartley's vote to reject the engagement clause as filed. The motion fails." He tapped a gavel once. The echo lingered in the room like thunder after lightning. Then, without ceremony, the double doors opened. Outside, a wave of journalists surged forward, muffled only by the presence of assistants and PR staff trying to block cameras. Flashbulbs popped, voices called names. No one had announced the vote, but they had all shown up. Family power shift. Trustee surprise appearance. Vern Holdings votes down engagement clause, Camille Hartley at center. I didn't look at them. I just adjusted my blazer, and turned toward the exit. As I reached the door, Charlotte's voice trembled behind me. "You'll regret this. You'll see what it costs you." I paused, then turned back just enough to meet her eyes. "I know exactly what it cost me, and now so do you." Gregory walked beside me as we left the boardroom, his pace easy. "You didn't blink," he said softly. "I couldn't afford to." He gave a slight nod. "They won't forget today." "I didn't come to be remembered. I said I came to be counted." We stepped into the elevator. The doors closed. Inside, I looked down at my right hand. The silver ring I wore, plain. No stones glinted faintly under the overhead light. It wasn't a wedding ring. It was one I bought the day Isaiah and I paid off our first joint loan. I wore it to remind myself of what we built with no spotlight. No praise, just grit and vision. They called me weak for marrying him. But today, they learned weakness is what happens when you build your future on someone else's silence. And I had finally broken mine. The gallery was still the kind of quiet that feels deliberate, not emptiness, but presence, the way silence can fill a room more completely than noise ever could. Sunlight slanted through the tall front windows, casting soft shadows across the concrete floor. I stepped inside slowly, my flats clicking gently against the smooth surface. The air smelled faintly of lavender oil and varnish. It always did this time of year. I kept the diffuser on a timer just enough to warm the space without overwhelming it. The walls were mostly bare. I hadn't hosted a new show since the fall, hadn't curated anything since the holiday rush. I told myself I was waiting for inspiration. In truth, I had been waiting for stillness, for the hum of external demand to stop long enough so I could hear my own voice again. It had stopped now. I carried a small frame in my hands, matte black glass, clean and polished. Inside, it was a photo I'd nearly forgotten until last week, tucked in the bottom of an old envelope on my grandfather's writing desk. In the picture, I was maybe 6, dirt smudged across my cheeks, a too large sun hat slipping down over one ear. My grandfather knelt beside me in the greenhouse, one hand on my shoulder, the other steadying a watering can as I tilted it toward a pot of lilacs. His face was soft-lined from years of weather and wisdom. Mine was all grin, wide open proud. Behind the photo, pressed flat and slightly faded, was a single dried lilac bloom. Beneath it, in his familiar block, handwriting a short note. "Even if they never see you, I always did." I hadn't cried when I found it. Not immediately, I just sat with it. Let it settle somewhere deep. There are certain recognitions that don't call for weeping, only silence, reverence. Today, I placed the frame gently on the central display wall, the one directly across from the gallery's front windows. I centered it with care, checked the angle, then stepped back. Below it, on a thin brass plate, the engraving read, "Legacy is earned, not given." I stood there for a while, hands clasped in front of me, just watching the morning light trace lines across the photo. The gallery was closed to the public, but that morning it felt fuller than it had in months, like the air was taking its time. I didn't need to showcase 10 pieces. I didn't need to host an event. This one frame was enough. It was mine. Behind me, footsteps padded across the floor. I turned to see Erin, my intern, holding a folder of flyers, her short curls bouncing as she walked. She was barely 22, whip-smart, full of ideas, always sketching in the margins of meeting notes. She paused when she saw the frame. "Is that you?" she asked, voice quiet. I nodded. She stepped closer, eyes studying the picture. "You look happy." I said softly. I didn't know yet that being seen wasn't always guaranteed. She looked at me, then head tilted slightly. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." Erin hesitated. "How did you survive all that? everything with your family, all the ways they tried to erase you. The question settled gently between us. I thought for a moment, let the words rise without force. I stopped asking why they didn't love me, I said, and I started loving myself. She nodded slowly, holding my gaze, then walked back toward the office to finish sorting prints. I stayed there alone with the frame, letting the weight of that sentence sit where it belonged. Because it was true. All those years I had bent myself into quieter shapes, hoping they'd notice I'd sent gifts without replies, paid bills without thanks, stood in the shadows clapping for Charlotte's latest milestone while wondering if I'd ever be clapped for two. But they had shown me who they were, and I had finally listened. The past few days had unfolded like a long exhale. After the boardroom vote in San Francisco, the press speculated Circled moved on. Charlotte's team scrambled to refocus the brand narrative. My mother hadn't called. My father sent a single message. This isn't how families work. I didn't respond. Because for me this was how it worked. Silence until they needed something, then urgency wrapped in guilt. I had carried their expectations for too long. Let them define my place as support, never centerpiece. Not anymore. I had no desire to replace Charlotte. No need to win a contest I never agreed to enter. I just wanted to exist without permission. Outside, the first visitors of the day passed by. A couple paused at the gallery window. The woman pointed to the photo. They lingered a beat longer than most, then kept walking. I didn't know what they saw. I didn't need to. It wasn't for them. It was for me. For the girl in the photo, grinning through dirt and sunlight, unaware that life would one day ask her to choose between peace and performance. She had chosen well. I walked to the back, turned on the soft lights overhead, then unlocked the front door. The gallery would open today without fanfare. No press release, no curated theme. Just one frame, one truth. And it was enough. It came on a Monday morning, a voice memo from the family group chat sent by mistake. No caption, no context, just a file titled Update from Dad. I didn't open it right away. I'd learned to let things sit, learned that not everything demands immediate attention. I finished loading the dishwasher, fed the sourdough starter I kept on the kitchen counter, brewed a second cup of coffee. Then, once the house was quiet again, I sat at the table and pressed play. Static at first, then his voice familiar in that sharp, off-handed tone he used when he thought he was being funny. She chose to marry below herself. My father said, "What can I say?" Camille always had poor judgment. A pause. The faint sound of a fork scraping a plate. Charlotte's voice next. "Well, I married, right? At least I didn't bring shame." Then silence. They didn't know I was listening. That was what got me. Not what they said, but how easily they said it. Like I was an old anecdote they'd told too many times, like I had become a private joke between them, something to fill the space between sips of coffee and bites of brunch. I didn't cry. I didn't throw my phone or scream. Instead, I saved the file, forwarded it to my email, created a folder called Truth, dropped the recording inside. Then I added a note below it. "Play this if you ever think about asking again." I whispered it aloud as I typed. It didn't sting the way it used to. That was the surprise. The hurt was still there but dulled. Not because I was stronger, but because I was finally done, hoping it would be different. That afternoon, I opened the drawer in the hallway console and pulled out the wedding invitation I'd received weeks earlier. The edge had been bent, I'd nearly tossed it then, but something held me back. Now I lit the corner with a match. Held it gently until the flame caught. The smoke curled soft and gray like it had been waiting for permission to leave. When it was gone, I brushed the ashes into the ceramic tray I kept by the window. No alarm went off, no dramatic gesture, just silence, soft and final. Outside, rain had begun to fall. Slow, steady drops against the glass. The kind of rain that softens the air, makes everything smell like clean earth and second chances. I sat on the windowsill for a while, wrapped in Isaiah's old flannel shirt knees, pulled to my chest, watching the water trace paths down the pane. It wasn't joy I felt. Not victory. Just stillness. like the hum I'd carried for years had finally faded. The next morning, I arrived early at the gallery. The city was quiet wet from the night's rain. A few cars passed slowly on the street tires, hissing across the pavement. I unlocked the door, turned on the lights, and walked the floor with bare feet just to feel the space again. I had decided to open a new show. Nothing flashy, no themes, just work that spoke to the pieces of myself. I used to hide drawings from college mixed media pieces I'd made on quiet weekends, a collection of prints inspired by Isaiah's old blueprints. Each one had a story, but none needed to be told out loud. I hung the final piece just before noon. It was a framed handwritten note, just 7 words. They gave you their truth, give them yours. Arin arrived just as I was finishing. She stepped inside, blinking away the drizzle from her lashes. It smells like cedar in here. I lit a new candle, I said. She walked to the center of the room, looking at the new pieces. You finally did it. A show of your own. I did. She looked back at me. How do you feel? I thought about it. Clear, I said, like the noise has finally left the room. She nodded and went to the office, leaving me alone with the art and the rain. I sat near the front window, tucked into the corner chair with a cup of tea in hand, and let the quiet fill me. They hadn't called. They wouldn't. And for the first time, that didn't feel like a wound. It felt like a line drawn in the sand, one I had chosen, one I could finally stand behind. The city moved outside in slow rhythms, umbrellas, opening cars rolling past someone jogging with a rain jacket flapping behind them. Inside the gallery glowed gently framed pieces catching the light. No headlines, no applause. Just peace. And peace was enough. Some stories are not about revenge, but about returning to yourself after years of being overlooked, spoken over, or dismissed. Camille's journey was not one of loud victories or dramatic confrontation. It was the quiet unfolding of a woman who stopped asking for permission to belong. She chose her love. She built her legacy. And when her family failed to see her, she didn't shatter. She sharpened. In the silence they gave her, she found her own voice. This is a story for anyone who has been underestimated, overlooked, or erased. A reminder that your worth is not determined by who applauds you, but by who you choose to become when no one is watching. If this story moved, you share your thoughts in the comments, subscribe for more, and remember, strength does not always roar. Sometimes it simply refuses to disappear.